you so much.
Hello, can you hear me all right? Fantastic. Thank you, Dave. I hope I do make you look good. Trouble, I'm making myself look good at times, so we'll work on that one. Just wait for the thing to boot up. There we go. Fantastic. Yeah, the logo's changed. Well done. Spotted it. So it's good to be back here again. I've done more than 10. First one of these I did was in 2011, so do the maths yourself. I can never work out whether that's 11, 12, or whatever, but I missed last year because I got sent to a Grand Prix that was fun, but I'd rather have been here, oddly. Broadcom. You may have heard it mentioned. All I can ask today is that all my VMware colleagues here know as much about what's going to happen next as you do right now, because the merger's just closed, and there's an awful lot to still go out. Some of them don't even know if they're going to be employed in 3 months' time or not, or what role they're going to have, or what's going to do. So all actually I'm going to ask you today is to be incredibly understanding and compassionate towards my colleagues, and not ask them, what's going to happen with this product? What's going to happen next? Are you still going to, because they don't know. All right? So that's all I'm going to ask is one from my heart to you. Please be understanding today and supportive of those colleagues. It's an interesting time for all of us. I hope it's going to end well for all of us. And I hope we're going to be back here in a year's time talking about some really cool stuff we've done together, as I have done every year before. We've been through this kind of before with Dell and with EMC and others. We've been through it many times. We're well practiced at it, in fact, at VMware. It's never been quite the stage where they've been and ripped down the signs and replaced them on the offices, so quite as quickly as they have done. But we're getting there with that one. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. But what I want to talk to you about today won't change, actually, when we continue in the new world of VMware by Broadcom, because what our customers are doing isn't changing, what the market's doing isn't changing, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, all right? Now, I get asked every year, because people seem to think that you're a CTO, you're some kind of visionary wizard, and not just someone promoted beyond their own ability. And they ask me every year, can you do predictions? It's coming up to January, we've got to do predictions articles because social media wants predictions articles. And I always tell them every year I don't do prediction articles because, well, a couple of reasons. One, I can't predict stuff. And two, if you do, you look like an idiot in about 5 years' time when people go back and look at it and go, look what that plonker said. That never happened. But you can kind of do that with my VMUG keynotes anyway, so I don't know what I'm worried about. So eventually they said to me, well, look, can you just give us a list of the stuff you're talking to customers about? And so I did. And being marketing, they wanted it to be a nice number, like 10 things or 3 things. It can never be an odd number. I don't know how many it is. I think it's about 6 or 7 or maybe 11, depending on how you count it. So now I've actually just called it Some Things. So the presentation today is called Some Things. And it's really about the topics that I talk to people about. Now, CTO, I've said this a few times, but CTO stands for 3 different things in my role. The T bit stands for either Chief Technology Officer, for the stuff that you'd expect, which is working on products and strategy and what we do next with our products and customers. The second is Chief Talking Officer, which is this stuff. And the third is Chief Therapy Officer. Now, the Chief Therapy Officer bit actually probably is the largest part I do, which is sitting down with customers and going, do you know what? You might think you're doing really, really badly, but so's everyone else. And it's like when you were at school and you thought everyone else was much cooler than you, and then you found out when you got older, no, they were all just as rubbish as you were, just they were better at pretending to not be rubbish. And you look around at all these other customers doing presentations about how they've successfully deployed X and they've got fantastic IT and they've finally got a single pane of glass or whatever it is, and then you realize when you go and talk to them it's not true. So that's really what I spend a lot of my time doing. And in fact, what you'll find as a CTO, if you ever become a CTO, if you are one, you're kind of like the anti-hype man, in that I tend to just be calming people down about stuff all the time. They get excited about the next shiny gadget, and you're like, do you know what? Actually, it's not going to be as big as you think. And so that's why I'm going to talk about AI in a minute and tell you all about how that's not as big as you think, as OpenAI are finding out, as you'll see. So the first topic that comes up, the number one topic with every customer, is skills. And this is probably the one thing I talk to VMUG people about more than anything else. Because actually why you're here is to further your career. is to learn more, to be more educated, to be more capable, so that you can go back and be the one that knows more than your colleagues and know what, better and be, like Dave said, to go back and impress people. When I was sat in your seats and your shoes, which was quite a long time ago, back in the 90s, and I was the guy that got to go to TechEd 96. That dates me in a big way, not just with the year, but the title of the conference. And I got flown out to America, and I came back, and I was one of the 3 out of 260 consultants at the company I was at who'd actually been to the Microsoft TechEd, which meant I was allowed to look after the MSDN CDs. Woo! Power. There was the real thing there about being able to know a little bit more. I knew the code name for some Microsoft products that no one else knew, stuff like that. It was really cool, wasn't it, right? But that's what people want to do, is they want to learn skills. So you come here to learn skills. You come here to learn the cool stuff that you can go and take back to your friends. Now, the worrying thing I find when I go and talk to customers is when they're looking for new skills, the problem is they don't look inside their company. How many times have you seen it? Oh, we've got a new technology company. Let's go and hire someone who's got the skills in that technology. And so the message I've been banging on to CIOs and CTOs, et cetera, at the moment, because we have a skills shortage in our industry, because there aren't enough skills, and yes, there's still people putting adverts out for people with 10 years Kubernetes experience and stuff like that. They have no clue what's going on. We do have a shortage of skills. The point is that most of those skills already exist within organizations. You just need to teach your own people that are pretty bloody bright in the first place. And you're the people that should be leading that. So within VMware, and the people that work within the field in VMware that are here will tell you this, I started something many years ago called SME groups. And what it was there was some new technology coming at VMware, in the marketplace. And we were at VMware, this is 2013, 2014. And we had some new stuff coming out of the industry called containers. And most people at VMware were like, nah, not interested in that. But I went, okay, across all the people in the field, who's interested in playing with this new technology? I don't care what job you do. Literally don't care what job you do. But if you're interested in playing with this technology, come and join this group. We'll all play with it together. And we'll find out. And then strangely enough, when a few years later, we actually had containers as part of our product range and what we were doing with it, I had a whole raft of skills already in VMware ready to step up and take the job. And it was easier to fill to replace those people with some people who were both trained in VMware, because there's lots more of those than there were with people training containers. And we've done that since with SME groups around sustainability, around AI, you name it. There's a whole great list of cool things. So what I would suggest to you is just because a technology isn't being deployed by your company doesn't mean you can't go and play with it. And you can't go and find people in your organization that are also interested in playing with it and form a little group. And then when the time does come that technology is hitting your organization, like, well, actually, there's a group of 15 of us have been building one of those in a shed for the last 4 years. Do you want to see it? Kind of thing. That's kind of cool. And that's what we've done. So I'd say there's a lot of ways to approach the skills problem. But skills is the number one topic that I talk to customers about. And it's the number one thing that you're here for. And it's the number one thing you should be taking away from today is more skills. If it's just that little bit of knowledge that you want. Because that's what matters more about the success of us as an organization and as a group and an industry than anything else. But I mentioned sustainability. And the next topic that comes up all the time when I'm talking to leaders is ESG. Now, ESG is a fun one because it's gone from being CSR, corporate social responsibility, to being the next thing was ESG. And then it's just, oh, we have a report on this, right? We have a lovely report on ESG. Here's our standing. Now, this is changing massively in our industry. And what I'm saying is it's moving from being the last slide in the presentation deck to being the second or third slide in the presentation deck. And here's our stance on ESG was the last thing. Look how lovely we are. Brilliant. Thanks very much. To now it's becoming an early part of the conversation with customers. And not just about the fact we've got a green score in ARIA and other wonderful things we can do there, but the fact that what you're hearing now more in our industry is a term called purpose. And purpose is an interesting one to go and look at. I'm a judge in a set of awards called the Global Good Awards. In fact, I stood down this year because I was too busy, and Rory Chowdhury stood in my spot there. And the Global Good Awards then has become a conference which we went to called the Purpose Summit, which was really interesting about people getting together, because ESG isn't just about the sustainability bit of it, right? Because yes, we've all got 2030, 2040 goals. We've all got things we can tick about being renewable and all this kind of stuff. Everyone's got that already. No big deal. But it's what are you doing as a company? What are you doing to make change? What are you doing in your organization that has purpose and makes a difference? And that's the social and societal bit, too, that goes with it. And it's not just about DEI. It's about everything about the purpose of your organization. And it ties back to skills, because now people are having trouble attracting talent, and it's difficult to attract talent if you're attracting it to a company that doesn't have the right purpose. And so they go together hand in hand. And you should go back to your organizations and look at where E, S, and G report in your company and see how that's changed or changing, because it will change. The environmental piece might report up into the, I don't know, it might report up into the IT department, actually. Within VMware, it reported into Octo until yesterday. Now we don't have an Octo, so we'll see what happens after that. But then the societal piece, the social piece, that's now becoming part of a board member responsibility. At VMware, everyone VP and above, their direct bonus was affected by how we were meeting targets around DE&I. It was that important to the organization. And governance, well, that typically will be up at your CFO anyway, or CEO, because that's the go to jail section. So that's not very difficult to cover. But go back and look at your organizations, understand what's happening around the ESG space, because it is going to become more important to you. At the same time, I've talked to companies, and we've had a long conversation for all day. I've been a presentation for a customer. And this does happen. We have all day briefings with a customer, and then we go out for dinner in the evening. And it's only at dinner in the evening when we start talking about the other things, the non-work things. And in fact, one of the things that people don't realize is that I run the veterans group at VMware. I'm a military veteran. I was a reserve officer. And I run the veterans group, and we do a whole bunch of work with veterans. I'm trustee of a charity around that space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I start having that conversation, and suddenly the customer's like, well, why didn't you mention that in the presentations today? Because we've got a whole thing we're doing around recruiting veterans and working with military people and blah, blah, blah. And if I'd known that VMware was doing that and was a gold member of the employee recognition scheme, you could help us get from silver to gold. And suddenly there's another connection there with the customer or the organization you're trying to work with that's more around purpose than it is around selling them software. And that's what I'm talking about here with ESG, is we're seeing organizations connect around purpose. And that's really interesting to me, and it really makes me a bit more hopeful about what we can do as organizations, as an industry going forwards. So this isn't just the last slide in a deck where you tick we're RE100 members and we're signed up to 30 by 30, whatever it is this week. It's much deeper than that. It's moving further and further up people's agendas, not just because they won't get investment if they don't do it. Now, the next one that actually is quite exciting to me as a technologist is this bit. Now, many years ago, I stood on this stage, well, not this stage, it was one in a motorcycle museum in Birmingham. And in that, I talked about white box data centers and the white box cloud. I could go back, I think it was 2012 when I talked about it, or 2011 actually. We started talking about it the year before we called it the SDDC, the software-defined data center. And the idea back then was that because we're going to do everything in software, people aren't going to care what the hardware is. And back then we had some really cool companies coming up that were white box companies, and some of them went into some direction, some went into others. But essentially the concept was that you're not going to care about what the hardware is because everything's done in software. What you've got actually is just some storage, some networking, some chips that do compute, and some who gives a crap layer 2 switching, and we do everything on top of that in software. Now, it's been a long, hard battle to get people to wrestle their hands off the tin. And I said back then that if you were specifying SCSI cable lengths for a job, you had real problems with what was coming up in the future. Finally, thanks to market pressures and supply chain issues and lots of other things, it's happening. Anyone here tried to order some networking equipment in the last year and seen a lead time of less than 12 months for most of the stuff you want to do, right? It's pretty bad. So what are you doing? I speak to customers who go, well, I can't get hold of the tin that I want, so what I'm doing is I'm working out how I can just buy some commodity tin and do it in software, or I can do it in the x86 boxes I've got already. And that's happening now the same for AI. Because oddly, there's quite a demand at the moment for GPUs. And so if you suddenly want to buy a load of GPUs, they're really hard to get hold of. NVIDIA have sold, you'll hear various stories, whether it's the next 14, 17, 22 months worth of fab production has already been sold by NVIDIA. So, if you want to get one and you've not already got a pre-order in with some manufacturer that's got the code, already getting the stuff from NVIDIA, you're done in. So now people are going, well, can I do inference on a CPU? And yes, you can. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're seeing more and more people deploying commodity hardware to solve a problem around supply around hardware and suddenly discovering that software-defined actually works. So now's the time to actually probably win the NSX battle with your IT department and, more importantly, your networking team that still won't let go of ACI because they think it's the answer to everything, and move on, because the software-defined everything world is here, and it is happening. And so that, to me, is quite exciting. And it's the pressures of market that are forcing that, sadly, not what we should have been doing, which is we should have been doing this kind of thing from the start, which is just racking up servers and doing everything in software. But we're there, so get on it. Now, as I said, I'm afraid I'm going to have to talk about AI, because it's contractually obligated of me now as a CTO to do a presentation. You have to talk about AI. Now, AI is an interesting one for me because it's kind of like, well, you know, what do you mean? Well, the best summary of this I had was from a customer. This is a quote from a customer. I did a whole bunch of interviews with Robbie and a few others. We spoke to a whole bunch of customers about what their plans were about AI. And this is customers that had no clue about AI to people who had fully deployed LLMs and everything in between. It was a really interesting set of conversations. But this quote came out, which I loved, which was one company's approach to this. And it literally was, everywhere there's data in our org, there will be machine learning, and we're planning for that, and we're working for that. And I think that's the best thing we can all be doing as an industry, is understand that wherever you have data right now, at some point there will be machine learning of some small amount happening with, on, or about that data. So start to plan for how that's going to work. Now, AI, as Pat Gelsinger once said, is a 50-year overnight sensation. But the interesting thing now is that we're in the world of generative AI. Now, generative AI is an interesting point that I'm going to rant about now for quite a long time. But we're going to have a session later on with myself, Robbie, Paul, and I think some others as well on stage, where we're going to do an AMA. I think it's 11:10 or 11:20. We're going to have a session on that, where we're going to talk in a lot more depth all the stupid questions. And there will be no stupid questions about AI and LLMs, et cetera, because I've got some people that have been playing with them from our SME team, and Robbie, who leads it for us in EMEA. I'm going to ask them some stupid questions as well, because I'm still learning. But for me, what we've gone from is standard predictive AI, which, and again, another customer described to me as clever maths on data, which is the old regression prediction stuff, which is actually not that difficult to do. It's some clever graphing, really, and looking at some other things. But that was very much deemed the world of wizards, specialist data scientists who would go and play with this kind of stuff. The challenge is that because generative AI has got AI in it in the name, people seem to think it's part of the same thing, but it isn't to me. You have to look at generative AI and large language models as something completely different. And the way that I've understood it best in my head, and this is how I get through this stuff because I'm quite stupid, so what I actually have to do is I have to spend a long time working something out in a really simple fashion and then repeat it to other people, and they think I'm amazing, but it isn't. I'm just stupid, and it just took me ages to work that out, is that generative AI is a new programming language. And if you think of LLMs as a new programming language, suddenly things start to make a bit more sense to you. But think of it this way, right? Traditionally, when we first started with computers, if you wanted to have access to computing and play with computers, you needed to understand how to plug plugs into the original big 5 computers we had and program them. And then there were various better and better programming languages we went through, you know, 3rd generation. I won't talk about 4th generation programming languages, they were scary. It's just, I've got flashbacks to a really bad section of my degree around Miranda, I think it was called, which is a horrible language. And so on and so forth, till we get to something like Python and other bits where people can program, and if you wanted to get engaged with computers, you wanted to get a computer to do your will, you had to learn how to do Python. Now, if you want to get any computer to do your will, you just talk to it in English. And that's the key thing here. What LLMs have done for you, it's not some fantastic new thing on the back end in terms of AI, because we've not got we've not got artificial general intelligence, we've not taken a huge leap forward. What we've actually now got is a language interface to computers. That's what LLMs are. The computers aren't doing anything they haven't really done before. All we're now able to do is to talk to them and interact with them in a way that we couldn't do before, and get them to do things in ways that we couldn't talk to them before. And more importantly, I know it's important because my dentist asked me about it. And my mum, and she rarely asks me about anything to do with computers apart from my phone's broken, fix it, right? So this has become something that now anyone can engage with computers. And so when you see all the excitement online, whether it's in Twitter or Facebook or TikTok or whatever it is, where people playing with LLMs, that's not people learning about AI. That's people engaging with computers that have never been able to engage with computers before and finding they can make them do things, right? I could have made a computer, come up with poetry 5 years ago. It would have been pretty crap, but I could have made it do it, but it would have required some weird programming and some other stuff. Now I can just ask it to do a poem, and it's got a little bit better at it, or draw a picture, or whatever. Others have been playing with AI, have been doing generative picture stuff for a long time as well. All you've got is you've got a slightly more intelligent thing going on in terms of how you talk to them. Now, it's not clever, and it doesn't understand. And that's really important to understand, too, here. LLMs are not intelligent. They don't have understanding. What they don't do is they don't know. And they can learn, but they never really know what's going on. So here's an example for you. My favorite one was in GPT 3.5 with a medical diagnosis process, where what happened was they said, it gave it, okay, you can Google all this, it's all real stuff. We basically said, okay, here's the symptoms of some patient, diagnose it, please. And it came back with a diagnosis. It was a pretty accurate diagnosis. It was the second most likely diagnosis, as most doctors would have put in. And at the end of the diagnosis, it came up with a couple of references to a couple of medical papers that backed up the diagnosis. Except when you asked it, what are the medical papers, it then made them up. Because it had made up the titles of the medical papers in the first place. Because all it knew was through the predictive way of the way that it does token generation, it knows that when you come up with an answer to a diagnosis, at the end there's this section where you cite a medical paper, so I'm going to do that. It doesn't understand there's a peer review process behind medical papers, and there's a whole scientific process behind them. No, you just have papers with names that sound relatively good. So it doesn't understand the process, it just knows that these words come next. And that's really what you've got to understand about LLMs. They're just generative token guessing. And the way they do token guessing isn't even intelligent, because they don't look at whole words, they look at parts of words. So the word something might actually be S-O-M-T-H-I-N-G, and not even worry about the E bit in the middle. It might be 3 or 4 tokens, not the word something. It doesn't have context around it. They can't count, which is really fun. You have to get them to write their own code in order to count. I was talking to Robbie about that last night. So they can't count. You say, can you generate me a poem where the 4th letter of every word is G? It won't do it, because it doesn't know what 4 is. Which is kind of cool, because it just does predictive analytics. Best way someone described it to me was it's based on probability. So if I was to say to you, what's the last word in this sentence? We always finish each other's. You'd probably say sentences, unless you're a Frozen fan, in which case you say sandwiches, right? Now, typically the model's then going to go, okay, well, it's got a 90% probability it's going to be sentences, and a 10% probability it's going to be sandwiches. And that's how it works. That's what LLMs do. There's brilliant stuff and challenges around IP, and we'll discuss all this later in AMAs, but the IP one I love, because there's a fundamental legal issue, in that if I go and teach Robbie how to speak Chinese, I can't then charge him $1 every time he speaks Chinese, because that's not how it works. So if he goes and trains himself on my data, I have no method from an IP perspective of charging him for whatever he does with his trained model from that point onwards with my data. Now, one legal firm proved this in a really beautiful way, because another legal firm had a way that you could pay money to access their legal database. So it ingested and trained its entire model on their legal database, and now sells its model to customers, trained on their data. There's a lovely court case going on with that one right now, where one legal firm's trying to say, well, no, we haven't stolen your data, I've not taken your data, I've just trained my model on your data, like I taught myself Chinese using your Chinese course. It's very different. So there's a whole world of pain here. But the big world of pain, apart from the fact we're going to have lots of money here, and McKinsey said it's $4.4 trillion, so it must be true, because McKinsey have been right every time they've done anything in their entire lives. But no one can argue that there's going to be some interesting stuff going on with LLMs, certainly. But again, we're through the calming down phase right now. If I'd gone back 12 months ago, we'd all be like, oh my God, it's the changing of the world. And now we're 12 months later, it's like, actually, we had a look at it, and mostly it's crap, but we found about 3 ways where we think it might work. And Dave's played with it a bit, and he's got one running. It's a bit hokey, but we think it'll work for the chatbot. It's basically where you are for most customers. When you look at our infrastructure and what we've built, you essentially have to think about the fact that we're going to have data in multiple locations. And you're going to have to understand, in building this infrastructure going forward, where there's data, there's going to be machine learning. How are you going to build for that? How are you going to support that? How are you going to make sure that when people do turn up and want to run LLMs on your data, you've got access for them to get access to the data everywhere, securely, safely, and do what they want to do where they want to do it? That's a key challenge that you need to get ready for with what you're doing with your infrastructure. The second one, and the most important one, is privacy. The number one thing in the conversations we had with customers over the last 12 months that they've said they have a problem with IT and specifically with LLMs is privacy, right? How do I know where my data is and who's got access to it? If I go and use a public model in a public cloud that says it's not training its model on my stuff and is keeping my stuff in a separate place, how do I prove that? How do I get my own model and put it on premises and run it myself, but how do I know where that model came from? And this is another really cool challenge, and again, we want to talk about this a bit later on. But this has driven what we're calling private AI. And private AI is some way to solve some of those problems. And looking at architectures that aren't all about what you're going to have is one big winner of AI in the world, or 2 or 3 big AIs in the world, and everyone's going to use those. Because that's not the case. So if you remember when we had the cloud thing, and we're going to have 2 or 3 clouds, and everyone's going to use one of those 2 or 3 clouds, and no one's going to have any cloudy stuff anywhere else? Well, we're going through the same stupid cycle again with AI right now, where we're all talking about, are we all going to use one big AI or 2 or 3 big LLM models in the cloud, and you're not going to use your own private ones? Well, you are. And every conversation we've had with customers tells us that they're going to be running hundreds, if not thousands, of their own LLMs across their business in lots of different places. So we need structures and architectures around private AI. We also need to answer some more fundamental questions in our industry. My favorite one of which is, if I take a public model, how do I know what the hell it's going to do when I run it privately, even if it is open source, and they've all said it's brilliant, because how do I know that when I take this trained model into my business and run it on my private data in my private data center, there's not some secret prompt I can put in that will suddenly encrypt all of my data and upload it to China? Because no one can tell me what that LLM does. And when you go and talk to anyone about LLMs, they'll start talking through the first part of it, and then they'll skip a middle bit, and then they'll start talking about the end bit. And you go, what's that bit you just skipped? And they go, oh, don't worry about that. No, what was the bit you just skipped? They go, we're not really sure what happens in that bit. And seriously, that's where we are with LLMs right now. There is anyone you talk to, and even Robbie was telling me this last night, you get to this middle bit, and they go, we don't really know what goes on. It's kind of like, that famous cartoon, it's that then some magic happens, and then you get to the other side. It really is that case. So people are very scared about using these. We've heard some fantastic stories from customers about their approach to AI. My favorite was a large car manufacturer. Now, they said, a lot of customers are saying this, we're not willing to go and invest a whole bunch of money in building a massive, great big AI infrastructure if suddenly in 6 months' time, some regulator is going to come and tell us we're not allowed to do that anymore. And we're hearing that from banking, we're hearing that from manufacturing, we're hearing that from lots of different places. One car manufacturer just went, no, we're not worried about that, we'll just move it all to China. Which scared me, because they're a German car manufacturer. That's someone I'm never going to buy a car from again. But then I won't, because I use indicators. But the thing that I find with this is that we're seeing an awful lot of people just finding their way in this space. So this comes down to the therapy piece, right? Just because you've not played with an LLM already yet, and you've not had a proper play with ChatGPT, doesn't mean you're behind the curve, because there's a very small number of people that actually are doing it. If you look at Twitter, you think everyone's doing it and playing with it, but in reality, no. What most people are doing is starting to work out where this thing might actually land. And so from our perspective at VMware, what we're looking at it as, and the simplest way to think about this, is it's just another workload that's going to land on VCF. Now, what's that going to mean to what we have to make VCF do, and how VCF actually runs and supports this workload? Wherever VCF runs, we need to make sure it's ready for AI. And so that's why we've announced a whole bunch of things. So the first one we've announced is a private AI foundation architecture with NVIDIA. And so what we've done is we've got an awful lot of buzzwords, and we put them on a slide, and we said, there you go. No, there's an awful lot of effort went into this in building and testing and procuring and actually, making sure it works, a proper full top-to-bottom AI foundation architecture with NVIDIA. So if you've got NVIDIA in your environment and you're trying to do any of the NVIDIA-type AI stuff up the top there, whether you're running Nemo frameworks or whatever it is, we've got the ability for you to go, okay, well, here's how you can configure VCF to do that. Here's how you can configure VCF to sit on top of GPUs. And here's how you can get better than bare metal performance. 5 bits again. Remember when we did containers and they were about 5% faster when they were virtualized than they were bare metal, we've got the same thing happening with this. We've found it's about 5% faster doing it when you virtualize the GPUs to run the models than when you actually run them natively, which is kind of weird, but it's true. So, again, we've set out lovely, great, big, beautiful architecture, so when you are ready and you want to play with this, we're ready for you too. Now, if you're not doing it with NVIDIA, because you can't get hold of the chips or for whatever reason, what we announced at Explore in Barcelona was we can help you do that with Intel. And you'll notice down the bottom, yes, we've got more cool industry buzzwords like Anyscale and Hugging Face and other things on the top there, but if you look down the bottom, you'll see not just GPUs, but also CPUs. And so this will allow you to do full LLM or full AI, let's call it that, on top of both CPUs and GPUs. And there's a load of really clever stuff in here and making sure that the right workload ends up in the right place. Because actually, what's going to be important here, and this is when it comes back to the skills piece, and Joe, what skills should I be learning around AI? No, the skills is not prompt engineering. That's interesting and fun, but that's going to get better over time, and eventually it'll be something you don't have to learn. You just talk to it. What you should be learning is MLOps. MLOps is going to be the key thing to understand in your career going forwards. In fact, in anyone who does anything in IT, is how do I do the operations piece around machine learning at scale? And the MLOps space is huge, it's exciting, and dramatically changing in huge ways very, very quickly. So I've got teams of people that work on this, all trying to keep up with what's going on, and most of them have lost their hair as a result. But MLOps is probably where you should be focused, and that's where you're seeing all these Hugging Faces, Converge IOs, and so on and so forth, all these other Run AI and all these other different names and spaces going on in that space, because that's where it's going to be interesting. Because when you get to it, actually, it's the ops piece that makes the difference in IT. It's the ops piece, it's that management piece that actually is the differentiator. It's the differentiator for VMware. What's special about vSphere isn't the hypervisor, or NSX, or even vSAN. It's that operations layer that sits across the top of that makes it all work magically together. That's where the value is. You know, I remember years ago people going, oh, well, we've gone to Hyper-V because it's free. Remember those ones? And then they came back like 18 months later and said, well, we kind of, yeah, well, we've done the Hyper-V thing, but we've realized actually, have you got like the vSphere bits that work on top of Hyper-V? And we're like, no, because that's the secret sauce. The ESX bit's not the exciting bit. It's the vSphere bit on top. And it's the same as you got the stack. And when it comes to ML, the exciting thing is going to be what we do in the MLOps space. And so if I would ask you to focus on anything, it's look at the MLOps space and learn that, because that's where we're going to be investing our experience, knowledge to support the right MLOps tools on VCF and provide you with the ones that you need. Another thing we announced was private AI with IBM and Watson X. Watson has been a fantastic exercise in marketing by IBM for many, many years. But there's some really cool stuff now finally going on with Watson. We had some great presentations at VMworld. So oh, damn, I said it. Explore, it'll always be VMworld to me. At Explore about what we're doing with them and Watson X as well. So go back and watch some of those sessions online. But again, that's about deploying AI models and lots of different AI models you like with them in lots of different locations. But again, all supported on top of VMware. Also, we've got some data services stuff finally coming. This is exciting, woo, right? You know, it's the one thing I've been asked about for many, many years is what's VMware doing around data? Well, we've been working on it for years. We've been waiting for the right time. Now we've got some cool stuff going on. And not just vector DB stuff that we've been doing, you know, for a while, which is quite cool if you start playing with LLMs, but we've got some great stuff going with PostgreSQL. I'm sure what we're doing is inventing things that are harder and harder to say in the world of data management. That's the game, right? Is invent something that's really hard to say. But we've done some stuff with some announcements recently with AlloDB Omni, and again the Minio object store and a whole bunch of other different things as well. So there's the data services manager layer is an indication of, and if you heard Hock Tan or you've watched the Hock Tan interview that was with the 6.5 or whatever it was published yesterday, you'll hear him talk a lot more about what we're going to be doing is providing more and more services on top of VCF. So if you think about a cloud provider that provides IaaS services and then provides service layers on top, we've kind of done the IaaS bit now, just about got that nailed with VCF 5.1. Now we're going to start saying, okay, well, how come, and this is the point, if you're running your own cloud and doing it once, it's really easy to do these kind of services. If you're trying to build these things that are run by thousands of people in thousands of locations and supportable, it's a little bit harder. And so that's why we're starting to look at this. So you'll see Data Services Manager, and there's more to come. And I'm quite excited about the investment we're getting in these service layers that we're putting on top of that. So there's some really cool stuff coming. So this is just an indication of some of the things you're going to be able to build on top of VCF going forwards. Pretty exciting. And so this all builds together into this fantastic reference architecture for VMware Private AI, whether you're using Intel, NVIDIA, IBM, you name it, on top of whichever data services platform you want, whether you're running Kubeflow and Ray and other things on top of that, all sits on top of VCF. And you'll hear much more about that from us going forwards. But the point is, for most of you don't need it yet, because none of you are actually doing this. But when you do come to do it, or if you are doing it, we'll be there. Just like we were there for you when it came to containers, just like we were there for you when it came to VMs and everything before, we'll be there for you for this too. Now, this is what I had put on a t-shirt earlier this year. And this is what I got into trouble for, because Accenture have got a division called Cloud First. Some people thought they'd be upset about that. I know the guy that runs the division. He wasn't, because he understood what I meant by this. Because what I meant wasn't that Accenture are not cool. What I meant is I'm sick to death of going to see customers that tell me they're Cloud First. It's that simple. Because it's just not cool anymore. It's not trendy. It's in fact boring, lame, and just, you know, why are you not trying harder? So I go time and time again to customers, and you go and talk to them, and they go, basically I'm talking to like the level down from CIO usually in this case. And the CIO, and you go, okay, so what do you got here? Oh, we've got a Cloud First policy. What do you mean? Oh, we've picked Cloud X, name hyperscaler, and we're moving everything to that cloud. And you go, well, why have you done that? I mean, 5 years ago, I go, that's interesting, how can we help? Now I just sit there and like try not to cry, stare at them and go, why? Why have you done that? And they go, well, and this is typically, if I can summarize all the answers into one generic answer, it comes to, well, someone really senior at our company went to an F1 event with the hyperscaler. And here we are. It always ends up with, and well, here we are, right? But it's typically, so-and-so went to play golf with hyperscaler, so-and-so read an article, and you know, so-and-so was chatting at the country club to their other mate who's also a CIO, and he said he was doing it, so that's what they're now doing, and we're now doing, right? So what I suppose I actually mean by this is really public cloud as a default is no longer cool. Okay, if I'm going to define this slightly better for you, then but Cloud First is not cool. It looks better on a t-shirt than that. So what we're saying here is that just stop it, I think is the answer. All right, just stop. Stop kidding yourselves, because I can list for you hundreds, if not thousands, of customers that I've met that have been down a Cloud First journey and have managed to move about 5% of their stuff, right? And yes, you'll hear stories about repatriation. They are very few and far between. I'm not going to bang on about repatriation because it's not really a thing. We've got a few customers that have done it en masse, mainly retailers that are trying to get off Amazon because of Amazon reasons, right? But typically, it's not a big thing. What you've actually got is people who've tried to do a Cloud First thing and kind of stalled because they've realized it's not that easy. And what annoys me is we were just so stupid to walk into it in the first place. But the problem is, again, I was stood on this very stage in a place somewhere else in Birmingham a few years ago saying exactly this, that the future is hybrid cloud. The future is you will have lots of public clouds and on-premises. And everyone said, of course you're going to say that, Joe, because you work for VMware. And you don't have a public cloud, and you just sell on-premises stuff, so of course you're going to say it's hybrid. I'm like, no, I'm here because that's why I think what's going to happen is because I'm at VMware because I know that's what's going to happen. Otherwise, I'd be at a hyperscaler, but I'm not because I don't believe that's the way it's going to happen. And it's that simple, really. So really, this is where these sort of slides came from. You would have seen these at VMworld a while ago, but people went through this Cloud First thing, which I still find it unbelievable. I mean, like, you sit opposite someone and they go, we're Cloud First, and you go, right, okay, are you seriously telling me that you know that this one public cloud is going to do everything you need for your IT today? Seriously. And more importantly, you're going all in on them, so that means that you're also guaranteeing that they're going to do everything you need to do in IT in 5 years' time. That is literally as stupid as sitting opposite me in 1996 and saying you're all in on Compaq, right? it didn't make sense then, and it doesn't make sense now to say I'm all in on public cloud X, right? So people went to cloud first. Doesn't work, right? Because what we didn't learn from is what we actually do in IT is we migrate stuff. I'm finding it very hard not to swear right now, okay? But we migrate stuff. So think about what every single IT project you've ever been typically has been a migration. It's what I'm doing is I'm deploying the new thing and trying to work out how to get as much of the old thing to work with the new thing or on the new thing than we had before with the new thing and the old thing. Yeah? And then you ask, why were we doing the new thing? Well, we're doing the new thing because it's faster, cheaper, and more agile. That's your answer, right? The new thing is faster, cheaper, and more agile. So we had a mainframe, and then we deployed the AS400 because it was faster, cheaper, and more agile. And then we went to name all the things after that, Unix, x86, running both Windows and then Linux and so on and so forth. But what we did in that time was we spent our entire time doing migrations. I've been in IT for 30 years, and all I've done is migrations. I worked for a blooming migration company for 10 years. Right? That's what we do, migrating things. And so why did we not learn when we looked at cloud that that isn't going to work? Because it isn't. And it didn't. Because why? Well, the same reasons it never worked the previous 15 times we tried to migrate stuff. Because we don't have the skills for the people on the new platform. The existing apps are so big, heavy, and entrenched and embedded that they're difficult to move. And we end up with fragmented operations and security. Now, I can understand why a CIO thinks going all in on a cloud makes sense, because you get everything in one place. My ops and security is going to be really easy if it's all in one place. But I can tell you right now, you're never going to get there. So what you're actually doing is adding a little new piece to your existing screwed-up operations security by making it more complex by including a cloud in it. And actually, with most of our customers, it's not one cloud. It's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Doesn't really matter. So we went through this process of cloud chaos, where everyone is this now. And the problem was with that, people were taken in by the marketing. So they went to a Gartner presentation. And Gartner are always right. And they went to a Gartner presentation. The Gartner presentation said, do you know what? In 2021, globally, they spent 420 billion euros on cloud. And you went, Christ, that's a big number. I'm not spending anything like that. Surely everyone else is doing stuff in cloud, and I'm not. Why am I not? I should be cloud first, so I can get there faster and spend more money in cloud, because that's the thing to do. And then you look at how much is being spent on IT globally, and you realize that it's not even 10%. So you wonder why people are only about 5 to 6% into the cloud. It's because we've only spent about 5 to 6% of our budget in the cloud, maybe 10, right? It's not happening. In fact, that's twice as expensive normally to do it in the cloud than it is on premises, so that 10% there is about 5% of real workloads. So it's not happening. What is happening? What is happening is what we call Cloud Smart, which is very simple, which is you pick the app, and you work out what you need to support that app. Duh. Right? Because in whose world did picking the technology first, then working out how I'm going to ram everything I do into that technology make sense? It doesn't if you're a 14-year-old boy, and you decided you really like that PlayStation, so you're going to get everything to work on that PlayStation, and you try and run everything on it. But it doesn't make sense if you're an IT director. It doesn't make sense if you're a CIO to say, I'm going to pick that particular vendor over there, and we're going to make everything work in there. What it does make sense to do is say, okay, I've got these requirements, and actually when I bubble down, some of it ends up on that cloud over there. And that's how you end up with what we have in the VMware cloud piece, right? Which is really the world that's saying, actually, you're going to be putting lots of different things in lots of different places. That's what Cloud Smart is. Cloud First is not cool. Cloud Smart is cool. Picking a layer, a platform, which oddly we've called VMware Cloud Foundation, that you run on premises and in the public and in sovereign clouds and at the edge, in fact, anywhere you like, that runs any workload you like, including AI and all the other wonderful different things, and gives you all that choice, is actually what you need to do. Now, I said this a few years ago, and everyone said, duh, I'm not. I'm saying it again. It's true. This is what's happening in our industry. This is where we are. This is why we have 4,500 people running this all around the world in clouds, not to count the customers on top of that. So what's next, as I come to the last couple of seconds of my presentation? What's next in our industry? Because I'm not excited about AI. I've calmed people down on that one. We'll talk about it later. Cloud Smart, that's done. If you're still doing Cloud First, your history, right, that's done. What's actually going to happen in our industry next that we get excited about? Well, it's this. This is where the really interesting stuff is happening in our world right now. Telcos, cloud providers, and edge. Why? Because this is the battle that we're going to see happen in our industry over the next 4 or 5 years that you haven't realized is happening yet. Telcos and cloud providers are going to meet, if they're not meeting already. Telcos will acquire cloud providers. Cloud providers will acquire telcos. Where they're actually meeting each other at the start is at the edge. They're having battles where previously people would go and procure from a telco to solve an edge problem, and now turning around and going to a cloud provider or an IT provider to solve the edge problem. You know, we've got countless examples where we're seeing that in the marketplace, where people are saying, okay, what I was doing at the edge, I used to go to a telco to build that platform, now I'm going to a cloud provider. Cloud providers now sell networks. Seen that? Telcos sell clouds. Just neither of them have quite realized yet that there's a big battle going on between them that they're going to have this fight on. Telcos should have been the cloud providers. Rewind to 2005, who had data centers everywhere, huge networks, the ability to have power access everywhere, and a billing system that did individual tiny amounts of billing to thousands and thousands and millions of users in time segment basis, and had OSS and BSS to support it to. Telcos. They were built for cloud, except they were too big, slow, heavy, and ugly to switch around and actually do it. So a retailer did it and set the standard, and they've been playing catch-up ever since. We're now deep enough into that cycle that this battle is going to happen. So you wonder why we're talking about edge, why we're talking about telcos, why we have an entire telco division that is huge, and if you look at our future business that's being planned out, there's an awful lot going to be going on in the telco space for us. Over 100 telcos worldwide run on VCF. Vodafone in the UK, if you're using a Vodafone phone right now, that call handling and everything being managed about it is all being done. The actual call itself and data routing is going through VCF. Right out to the RAN, to the radio access node, is running our platform too. And the same with the cloud providers. So at VMware, it's quite an exciting place to be because I'm supplying all of this. And we have commonality across it all. So actually, this is what I'm most excited about for our industry, from an exciting thing that's going to be worth watching, worth playing with, and worth being involved in over the next few years. Yes, AI and other bits will form part of what goes on here, but fundamentally the bigger picture is about that. So with that, I've overrun my time by 2 minutes, and I'm really sorry about that, but hopefully it was a worthwhile rant for you. I thank you for coming to VMUG, and I really do thank you for coming to VMUG. I get invited to do this. I don't get to do it by right. I don't stand up and go, yes, I'll do the presentation, stand aside VMUG I'm presenting. They ask me to come back to this. Same with every VMware person. This is not a VMware event. This is a VMwareUserGroup event where they invite us to come and present. If they could fill it with community presentations, they would. So if you're out there and think you could do a better job, stand up and do it and be presenting next time. Hock Tan was at one event outside of core meeting expensive, important customers at Explore in Barcelona, and that was the VMUG leader group. Because the one thing that has amazed him, that has stunned him more than anything else about VMware, is VMUG. He's realized there is a huge army of interested people who use our products, who are influencers, who he wants to listen to as the people that actually set the direction around what we do next. And he wants to invest in future in VMUG more than ever before. And he said that to all of them before, and he said that to me personally as well. So this is an exciting time to be involved in setting the direction of VMware going forward too. So thank you for coming. I'll be here until at least 1 o'clock. I'm going to be in the AMA, and I'll be here for lunch as well. So I'd love to hear from you and chat to you one-to-one. Cheers.